there is a new Nickelodeon All Star Brawl game that was revealed yesterday, coming in the fall of 2021. Man, and not only is it just revealed, but it's on its way this year. And it's basically, as far as we can tell, kind of like a Super Smash Bros. For Nickelodeon Nick Toons. And I don't know that it's only restricted to the tunes. Maybe, real life characters from all that and Clarissa explains it all and that kind of thing might be on the table as well. But so far, we've just seen animated characters like from SpongeBob, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Hey Arnold, and such. It's
We have to put in the Clarissa, if I can get that word out, mixes your stuff up meme up here, and the people have to, oh, that's so good. Like, there's just so much they could do with that. But yes, you were saying all the other Nicktoons that are actually in the game.
right.
Yes.
And there's some pretty out there ones like Powdered Toast Man from the Ren and Stimpy show. Like that's really cool. So there's a lot on the table here, and Smash Bros has what, like more than 80 characters now. I don't suspect that this game will be that big, but man, there's so much potential here, and I think the roster could be very large. And this is obviously I don't want to call it a cash grab, because I think you could do this really well and really put the time into it. And it looks like they're making it a very competitive. Well, they're aiming to make it a fairly competitive game when they have like rollback netcode and wave dashing is the word on the street right now. We don't know very much at all about this game, so everything is still in the preliminary phases as far as we're concerned here. But it looks like if this is a legit fighting game that the community takes as a competitive game, you're going to have the kind of reach that Nickelodeon tunes are going to have across generations. And that this falls into the category of Smash Bros, which like everybody has Smash Bros, right? This could be a huge deal for a lot of different groups of people. A lot of different groups of gamers will come to play this game, and we could have a huge audience and see some really good things for the fighting game community in general because of this, if it comes to if it reaches the potential that it looks like it has.
Yeah, in what you say about this being more of a competitive type of game, there's been a kind of a big push among developers of video games to realize the value of actually having competitive balance and being thoughtful about that stuff. Now, being mindful of it, being aware of it, that's a thing, and then actually doing it are two very different things. It's hard to do. We've seen from fighting game developers who do this all the time that, competitive balance and other stuff like that, which we're going to talk about later, is not exactly the easiest thing to pull off. But making a genuine effort for it does make a difference in these games from what we've seen.
Mm-hmm. So there's so much to talk about, or potentially talk about, discuss with the potential of this game. I want to start fairly simple. We've seen a handful of characters revealed, and I just want to talk about characters that I would want to see make the roster and why. And so I have a list that I ended up with 6. There could be many more than 6, but I didn't want to go too overboard with this. And I have a few honorable mentions, but some characters that I could see that, one, I would really like to play just because I appreciate these characters, and 2, that they would lend themselves to a fighting game like this with their general abilities and powers and such. And that's not only to say that, like maybe a character can shoot fire out of their hand. It's like, okay, well then obvious. But there's some other kind of roundabout ways that you can be really creative with how you might turn a character into a combative version of themselves and how they might lend themselves to things like that. So I won't get too far ahead of myself. I'll start my list right here with the first pick, Timmy Turner from the Fairly Odd Parents. Fairly Odd Parents is, I don't know if it's underrated, but I think it deserves a little more attention than it overall got. And it was a really funny show. And Timmy Turner is, of course, the main character who has the two Fairly Odd Parents, Cosmo and Wanda, that follow him around. And there's a lot of ways you could go about handling these characters, and I think all of them are candidates to be even their own fighters, or maybe Cosmo and Wanda could be their own character where they're, a little tag team sort of a thing. But my idea here, you would get all 3 of them in one character, and Timmy would be accompanied by Cosmo and Wanda, maybe, and you could have them both have their own contributions to the character's overall toolkit. So like maybe when you have Cosmo, you can do teleports and slides or something like that, and when you have Wanda out, there's certain projectiles or like traps that you can create, because these are fairy godparents that could do virtually anything with magic. The sky's the limit, so you've got everything from giant snakes, birthday cakes, large fries, and chocolate shakes, right? Like there's a lot of low hanging moves, or you could turn your character or your opponent into those things, or have them appear on the screen, be some kind of a hazard, whatever. But there's so much when you're saying like this character has magic and they use magic to deal with whatever. There's a bunch of set pieces that you could call back to. And so there's already so much that you could do with this character, but specifically, I'm seeing them as like you remember Arya from Killer Instinct, where she would have like different components to her that would have sort of their own life bars to them, and if you did damage to those specific parts of her, like I think she had like a floating sentinel, and if you knocked that out, she would lose the abilities that came with that part of her. So maybe if you hit Wanda or if you hit Cosmo enough, they go out of the battle and then no longer are able to do whatever the powers that particular part of the character had. And I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah, that reminds me of Rosalina and Luma in
Mhm.
Smash. It seems like a pretty similar concept, and that's worked really well. Well, at least it worked very, very well in Smash 4. Rosalina's not as much of a thing in Smash Ultimate, but she was pretty nice back in the day.
Mhm.
So
And while we're on the subject of Fairly Odd Parents, I don't think that these characters would make it to the actual game. Although yet one has to wonder, after they get to all of their go-to obvious fighters, maybe they with DLC can go into some of the side characters. But hot damn, I would love to see Dad, Mr. Crocker, and Doug Dimmadome come in and be part of the fray. Maybe as just like kind of assist-like characters, but if they were their own, I would have no problem with that. Crocker is this spazzy, super paranoid character that like knows of the existence of the Fairly Odd Parents and things along those lines, but no one believes them. Dad is just a hilarious, sitcom dad type of character, like the likes of Randy Marsh, Homer Simpson, that kind of thing. And then Doug Dimmadome is the super rich, like billionaire character with a really tall hat, and I just gotta wonder what giving him like a Kung Lao sort of hat with his hat would look like in a game. That would be a lot of fun. So anyways, that was my dipping into the Fairly Odd Parents. I'd say Timmy Turner with Cosmo and Wanda along with him in some capacity, but that's my first character. My second is Daggett and Norbert from the Angry Beavers. I don't know how much this show is beloved, but I watched it so much. And again, I think that this could be either a pairing, sort of like the Ice Climbers, or maybe even a stance change kind of character, because there's a lot of pairs you could do for Ice Climber type. There's the likes of Phil and Lil from the Rugrats is another quick one. Obviously, Cosmo and Wanda that we talked about, Daggett and Norbert. But Daggett is very much a high-strung, very fast, zippy, like almost rabid at times, kind of Tasmanian devil sort of character, while Norbert is like the opposite. He's very slow, he's very reserved, laid back, just chill. And I think a stance change where one version is very rush down, that's the Daggett, right? And then the other version is maybe more zoning and maybe heavier hits but slower in movement. With Norbert would be really cool, and you could explore two very different styles within the same character. I'm very drawn to those, not necessarily to play them, but you have the likes of Zeku in Street Fighter, or Gen in Street Fighter 4, where they kind of become a whole different character with different abilities, and the technicality of that, it can be a little bit intimidating, but it's really cool, especially when you make it all come together. And these characters certainly lend themselves to that, like their personalities lend themselves to that idea very nicely.
mhm.
And you would also have, at some capacity, you'd have to get Stump in there. Who is it? Is it Villager that has like the rocket? It looks a lot like Stump. It reminds me of Stump in Super Smash Bros. And Stump, for those of you that don't know, is literally just a tree stump with a face kind of drawn onto him. But he is somehow he actually has influence in the world around. Even though we never see him move or do anything, he seems like an inanimate object that somehow every time we're not looking does stuff. I don't know how you would incorporate that into a fighting game, but there's a lot of potential, as is usually the case with cartoons that have, super deep pockets and can endure pianos landing on their heads.
Yeah, there you go.
The next one is probably the most obvious and most requested of the characters that we haven't seen already in the game in the trailer that we got, and that's Aang from the Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's just no way around this character. He's so beloved. This whole series is beloved, especially within the FGC. But the reach of this series is really large. It was a very big success, and he is a combative, anime fighting type of character to begin with. He's able to shoot fire. He has powers with water, all of the different elements and such. He's just made for this kind of a thing. And if Aang isn't like a top 10 character, I think people are going to be upset just because of the expectation for him already.
Yes. Yeah, you want this guy top tier, kind of thing. It's like, this is kind of like it's like what we've talked about, like with Ryu. You don't want Ryu too low tier in this game, kind of thing. And it's like, if you're gonna make someone top tier, design him really well. Don't make him overpowered. That would be very easy to do with who he is.
Yeah.
But don't make him weak. This is not a character you want to be weak. It's like Akuma being weak.
I was thinking this is like the Akuma if SpongeBob is Ryu at this point, a poster boy for Nick Toons.
Yeah.
But now here's a question though that I want to pose to you. Would it be more strategic to make Aang a base roster character or put him behind the allure of DLC?
This game looks very DLC heavy to me from that trailer. Now, I don't know how many more characters we're going to get. It's not like they have a bad roster, but I'm a fan of like Raphael on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's no Raphael in here. It's Michelangelo, Leonardo, and where's Raph, where's Don? It's like we know a lot of DLC is coming. So in this day and age, I'm pretty good with a lot of DLC, obviously, as long as it's not done like where they're really locking out major characters. And I could see this being an issue if he is DLC, but I don't know. It's like Akuma was DLC and no one complained either. So
yeah,
it's
as long
kind
as
of
we
one of those
got
type
him.
of things. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there could be a huge campaign and a build-up for how much excitement there would be behind Aang, but also you might want to use that just to get this game off the ground. That said, this game is already like a home run hit from day one just because of what it is. And that's not to say that they couldn't mess it up by making the game poorly, but you have enough IPs, people are going to be excited enough just to play as SpongeBob or Helga that I don't think you would need the star power that Aang would bring, and then you could really use him strategically as an early DLC to keep things going after the initial hype. But we'll see. But either way, Aang needs to be in this game. If they don't, I have a note here, if they don't put Aang in this game, they messed up.
Yep.
The next one, Heifer Wolf from Rocco's Modern Life. Now, we probably want to see the likes of Rocco, and I think there's also an argument to put like one of the big heads in. That'd be interesting. Now, Rocco's Modern Life is a show that kind of was big a while ago, and then they made a movie or like a feature-length version of it. It was like 2 years ago or so, which was very much updated for modern times. It was a show that just commentates on modern technology and social trends and things along those lines. It was actually really smart and fun. It was also fairly violent. There's a lot of smashing and crushing and stuff, and they're extremely resilient toons, so no harm, no foul. But it lent itself to violence very nicely. Heifer is this cow that was raised by wolves, which is funny. I'm sorry, he's a steer, male. I have a note here that says you better not skip Rocco's Modern Life. I don't know how many modern, younger crowd kids would get it, but if they've got Powdered Toast Man in there, they'd probably get some Rocco's Modern Life. And while Rocco would be a good addition himself, maybe you could have Spunky come in for certain moves or assists and whatnot. Heifer was interesting to me because I can see him immediately as a bigger bodied sort of Donkey Kong or King K. Rool type character. And as far as his moves go, maybe he's a little more in the command grabby, or he rolls because he's very round, very rotund. He could have rolling attacks a la Blanca or something like that. Do higher damage, maybe be a little bit slower, a little bit less in the way of maneuverability, but be one of those heavy hitters. I think that he could be really cool, and I don't know that we've seen any characters thus far that are really fitting this particular bill. So I think he could fill that role, and it would be nice as one of those bigger bodied characters.
Yeah, he's got a perfect personality for a fighting game because he's pretty kind of gentle, and like he might like kind of like apologize as he beats the crap out of you and stuff, and which would be really fun. Like he's got a great personality for a fighting game. I love Heifer. Like Rocco's Modern Life is something watched back in the day, and it's a cool show, very cool show.
You want to see my new tattoo? It was a little spicy too. Like I remember that was one of the shows that The parents may say, yeah, you got to skip this one. And
Yeah.
again, because of the violence a little bit, people getting crushed all the times. I have another.
Rocco worked as a phone sex worker. Like he worked on an
Oh,
adult
yeah.
hotline, and one
It
of the big
was
heads like called into him, and like it got really awkward, and it was like, oh wow, this is some adult level kind of humor here, but like
mhm.
it worked. But yeah,
Stare
it
into
was
my
interesting.
nipples of the future. Is that really, really big, man? I should go back and watch some Rocco's. I have one more note here that at some point that I don't know if it would be through Heifer, through a different character. Maybe it would probably be through one of the big heads. But do you remember the Fat Heads, which were the cartoon that Ed Big Head's son created? They were just these two, like, I don't know what they were. They were kind of these weird blobby characters, but they would just smash each other with parking meters. That's pretty much that was their bit, was that there'd just be a cartoon people would watch and they'd smash each other with parking meters, get hit in the head with coconuts, that kind of a thing. But
Gotcha.
you could have them come in and just smash the crap out of your opponent. Okay, so number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the list, Doug Funny. And not the Disney version of Doug. Obviously, it'd be the Nickelodeon version of Doug with the short sleeves. Disney version of Doug is whack. Although I hear good things, but Doug Funny is interesting. Now he's much more in the vein of reality. Like he's like an adolescent kid, teen, kind of coming up and going through the lessons of social growth and coming of age and all that kind of stuff. But Doug was characterized very much by his imagination, and he had a couple of characters that he would embody as he was going through and learning certain lessons, and a lot of them were one-offs. But he had two in particular, Quail Man, the most obvious, and I think maybe you could do just Doug as Quail Man, and that would be a good enough character by himself. But you could also have him where you would go into these modes. Maybe he could become Quail Man. He could become Smash Adams, which was a very James Bond spy kind of character. But there's so much you could do, because while Doug was very much set in real life where pianos falling on heads would cause a casualty, he also very often went into these imaginary realms, and you could sample from those all over the place. And the intro sequence from Doug was very memorable. It starts out with him, because he would journal a lot, right? And so it would start out with him drawing this line, and then the line would become animated, and it would kind of cause all of the introduction animation to happen. And maybe you could do something like that where he draws a line and then he has this animated pencil line that he could treat as a whip or treat as a lasso or make as a barrier. He could manipulate that. There's a lot of stuff you could do with the character, and he's so beloved. I mean, he was on both Nickelodeon and Disney. There's a lot of reach that you have with Doug. People really like him. And who wouldn't want to see Doug Funny fight to the death with Hey Arnold? It's like you got to see that at some point. So Doug Funny's number 5 here.
Now, John, I have to ask you, did you ever have like a thing for Judy Funny, Doug's older sister? Like, did you ever think she was hot?
She was always, no, because she had like, I didn't like how, like, I think the side of her head was shaved, and as a kid I was
Yeah,
like, that's weird. I was
but
never
that
really
became a
into
thing.
the,
Like,
it
that's
did.
a style now. Yeah, she was ahead of her time, man.
Sure. And yeah, to each his own, to each her own. And
Yeah, okay,
the
so I guess it
whole,
was
she was
just
very
yeah,
artsy fartsy Shakespeare. And
yeah,
she was so often antagonistic to Doug
yeah.
that
That's true.
I didn't really like that about it. I didn't hate her, but
Yeah,
no, I did not have a thing. It's all about the patty mayonnaise.
yeah. Patty Mayonnaise was like nicer, but Judy was definitely hotter. So yeah,
Judy's a little more exotic. I'll give you that for
yeah,
sure. Comment who's hotter, Judy,
yes.
Judy Funny, or Patty Mayonnaise? That's where this channel is at now.
You
All
come
right.
to event hubs for the cartoon, hotness scale, whatever. Yeah, that's
Yes.
that's what we do.
The
So,
biggest Doug crush. All right, and then my last one here, and I think this was the one that I was most excited about, which may be why I saved it for last. It's Grandpa Phil from Hey Arnold. Now, Hey Arnold is similar to Doug in that it's very real life. Piano falls on a head would kill a character, but Grandpa Phil is sort of a side character. He steals every scene that he is in, and he's so good. I think he's the best character through and through. And there's a lot of good characters in that show, but I think Grandpa Phil is the best, and he's in super good shape. There's an episode where he thinks he's gonna die because no one in his family has lived past, I think it's age 81 or 89 or something like that. I don't know, not important. But he goes to the doctor at one point, and they're like, "You're in super good shape," and he goes through a Rocky montage where he's doing all of these one-handed push-ups, and eggs and all that kind of stuff and running in the streets. He's in really good shape. He could fight, and it would be funny to see an old man who looks really frail. He's always hunched over and has a hand on his back, but he could fight. He could take it to you. And he's also Steely Phil, from those that remember the episode with Chinese checkers. There's so much personality in this character, and I don't know exactly what his moves might be. But you could figure it out. Maybe he's a little more hand to hand. Maybe he has assists from other characters in Hey Arnold. But as I think about this franchise, and we do have, I think Helga is the only one in there, and people are pretty excited about her to begin with. But I don't see a lot of characters that would lend themselves as fighting game type characters, right? Like some buff, there's Big Bob, Helga's dad, and there's Ernie, the guy that's in the boarding house that's all about demolition, and like maybe Harold, the big bully kid, or Big Patty for that matter. But those are all fairly side characters, and while Grandpa is certainly not a lead, like I said, he steals every scene that he's in. He's so memorable, he's so good. It's just that, well, his head is very obviously a phallus, and so maybe that would get the game a teen rating. I don't know. In this day and age, maybe they'd have to change that up a little bit. But I mean, I think that's just funny. So it's one more reason why I would want to have him in there. But Steely Grandpa Phil is my last pick here.
All right. Now, before we go too far afield, I know you're a huge fan of South Park, and I know that's obviously not a Nickelodeon thing. But what if what if this game blows up big enough where they make it like Smash Brothers and they bring in stuff outside of Nickelodeon, other tunes in here? Like, I mean, who would you want? Like, my thing for South Park would have to be Randy Marsh. I would have to see him, but probably they'd pick Cartman or something like that. But like, if Tegrity Farms or something, they could not do that, right? They could not. That would be too bad. But
For
like,
Nick Toons?
There's some potential here for, like, if this game blows up, maybe some other cartoon franchises could.
Homer Simpson, Randy Marsh, Rick Sanchez, Archer, Sterling Archer. Yeah, like there's, did I say Homer Simpson? Yeah, across the board, there's a lot, and we don't, excuse me, we don't know if this is only restricted to the tunes, like I said, or if the IRL characters could be part of it too. Who knows if Keenan and Kel could be part of this whole thing too? So, a lot of potential here. So, and I would say my first pick would be Randy as far as a South Park character, just because he's my favorite character. I think he's the best character in the show. But there's so many superhero types. You could get one of the weapons from the Fun Times with Weapons episode, where they're kind of anime versions of themselves. The World of Warcraft. There's so much you could do. Towley, maybe just he seems like he would fit into this particular game. But no, let's get this game off the ground, and before we jump into guest stars that are M-rated.
Yeah. This is awesome. It just got announced. Let's completely ruin it with our ideas, because
Right.
let's go. Kind of thing. And so, like, there's a certain turning point, because these are cartoon characters fighting, so it's probably going to be a teen rating no matter what, right? But like, we're like, all the stuff with South Park, you're pushing it into, like, the higher rating and stuff, the mature and stuff, potentially, depending on how you do it. Yeah, maybe you could do it. I mean, what are the South Park games have all gotten like a teen rating and stuff on there. They somehow miraculously put it in there, but I think some of them got it mature too. I don't know. I'm trying to remember.
I think if it's a teen rating, they didn't do a South Park game right.
There you go. That sounds about right. So
I don't have any Rugrats characters on this list, and there are many more that would absolutely fit for this, and maybe we do a part 2 in future weeks. But I didn't put any Rugrats characters on here. I would say that, and I watched a lot of Rugrats when I was a child. I would say that if you could put Dill in as just like the training dummy, which is weird to say, like the youngest of all the baby characters in the Nick Toons would be the training dummy, but that was just such an annoying character. I hated Dill. I do have a few honorable mentions here. The first one is Jenny Wakeman, which is Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot. She's a robot that is completely built for a game like this. I am almost certain we will see this character pop up. I didn't watch it a lot. I wasn't a huge fan, but she's got stuff like, first of all, she's a robot. She's got the strength of 1,070 men, and a revolving arsenal of weapons. So like she's like, Batman's utility belt on crack, or on steroids. She's got giant spiky fists. Her hair turns into drills. She's got an electro claw, fire and ice blasters, laser vision. She has like Shiva arms where they come out, and she's got like 4 or 6 arms with swords that she can do, which would be maybe kind of a cool like Final Smash, Final Form sort of a thing. Heat gun, buzzsaw arms. So like the character is made for this kind of a setting. So I would imagine Jenny Wakeman would end up in there. I also said Jimmy Neutron. I never really liked Jimmy Neutron. I watched the show a lot more than you would think for someone who doesn't really like it. Went and saw the movie, but like Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, has the same, the equivalent of Dexter from Dexter's Lab for Nickelodeon. All of his crazy, inventions lend themselves very obviously to a game like this, but he's also super lame, so whatever. But I imagine we'll see Jimmy Neutron at some point. And my other one was, we don't have any rocket power representation. I'm sure we will, and it'll probably be Otto or Reggie, but I had to say the squid because we talk about the squid here from time to time, and I actually had to tell John what the squid was because I kept referring to the squid of the group, and he's like, "What the heck is that?" So I had the guy that the one that when the group wants to jump over a fence or do something athletic or whatever, usually the last one over gets hung up and whatnot. But wearing roller skates and with a hockey pad and a baseball that he throws, the rocket power is all about sports. You could really easily incorporate sports as like projectiles and guards and things like that. So, anyways, those are some of my honorable mentions. But that's my list of characters that I would like to see in Nickelodeon All Star Brawl. Very excited. A lot that could happen with this game. It could very heavily affect the FGC as we know it. So really looking forward to it and looking forward for more information coming out. But comment with your characters that you would most like to see. Tell me why I'm right for my picks and how you hadn't thought of them, but that was a really good idea. And yeah.